So welcome everyone to our March 2023 Genealogy Tea Time for the Sons of the American Revolution Genealogical Research Library. I am Cheri Daniels. I'm the Director of Library and Archives here at the headquarters in Louisville, Kentucky. Once again, for all of those of you who are not in the Kentucky area, if you're ever coming our way, stop by downtown Louisville. We're right across the street from the Louisville Slugger Bat. So you can't miss us.
Is it genealogy course?
Very easy to find. The premise of our genealogy tea times, it's basically a lot of discussion, and we try to assign some topics that we think will be helpful for people to discuss or ask questions, share resources. We have the basic format is it's I don't want to say it's a free-for-all, but it's kind of a free-for-all in a way. Sometimes I'll ask some pointed questions. Like I said, our topic today is proving revolutionary patriotic service, which hopefully opens the door to where it's not just about military, that we are going to go ahead and talk about any type of patriotic service that would be acceptable. So with that in mind, one of the first things we do is we kind of go around and just kind of, especially there's not that many in the group, so we have time to just briefly introduce yourself, tell us where you're coming from, what part of the country or out of the country, and we will move on from there. I don't think we'll talk about our current research yet, but I'm going to do that. But I also want to give a shout out quick. I know they will jump in. We have two of our headquarters staff genealogists joining us that I see on the screen. One's Deborah Maddox and Bill Burchfield. So they will probably really pipe in with a lot of resources that they deal with on a daily basis. And so thanks to everyone coming. And I'm going to start with, I see on my screen, it's going to go in that order. So I see Elizabeth rolling around up there. Can you tell us, introduce yourself and let us know where you're coming from?
I'm from Boston area, and I'm trying to find research on my Wormstead family from Massachusetts. It's been here for, I was told, since the Mayflower.
I think you'll go first.
Okay.
Welcome, and I've got brick wall in the Boston area myself, so someday I may be up in your backyard doing some research. Next I see John Sinks. He's a former genealogist general, aren't you? I'll let you do the actual intro, but you've got a long history with SAR. Let's just say that.
Yeah. I live in Arlington, Virginia. I have been doing genealogy for 49 years and 11 months. Next month will mark the 20th anniversary of doing genealogy seriously. My most recent research has been focused on Maryland and Virginia.
Wonderful. All right, next on my screen is Chris.
Sorry, hitting 20 buttons and I still can't get through. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Great. I'm Chris Donacar. I'm in Edmonds, Washington. And actually I've been, doing genealogy since I was 10. There are a lot of secrets in the family they wouldn't tell me, so a stepfather pointed me in the right direction to find information, and it got addicted. So now I do a lot of genealogies for friends and family, and I'm stuck a couple different places. But when it comes to the military, I have gotten the Dutch are so entwined, they drive me nuts. So I've got a great member that I'm trying to find for my husband, who I know was in the military because of a small obit in the New York paper, and he was from New Jersey. And the only other thing they said in there, he was a hero, and all I know is his last name. And then when I start looking up the last name for Revolutionary War heroes, I'm kind of going, oh my Lord, there's more Harringtons than I ever thought in my life. Mm-hmm. So that's one of my goals.
Great. Hopefully we can share some resources that'll help you today. The next person in line is Carla Trussell.
I'm Carla. I'm from Texas. I live halfway between Fort Worth and Abilene. I've been doing genealogy for 55 years. I started when I was 15. Luckily, I had lots of great grandparents and great aunts still alive at that time. And I'm going to be 70 next month. So right now I'm trying to compile my research into a book so my kids won't throw it all away when I'm gone.
Admirable, admirable mission there. Next is Deborah.
I finally figured out how to hit the right button. Deborah Maddox. I've been researching since 1989, and was really in the middle of doing a lot of different research, DAR, all kinds of fun stuff. Got hired on with SAR as a staff genealogist. I was there for 9 years, and then left for 9 years, and then now I've been back for a year. And but researching the entire time, and no one wants to hear my brick walls because they're as many as anybody else's.
Yeah. We seasoned genealogists tend to have more than one, that's for sure. Next, I see Bill.
Hey, Bill Burchfield, staff genealogist. Been researching for a while, but honestly didn't really get deep into it until I met Cheri. And she threw me in the deep end at KHS doing some research and stuff. And the project that she brought me in on hooked me for life. And it was an amazing production that we did. And I've fallen in love with being a genealogist.
Yes, took him quite a pivot. He was a librarian. That's so by education, he's got his master's in library science, which fits real well with research and all of that. And so yeah, it's a natural fit to kind of switch gears a little bit, because it doesn't mean you're done with the libraries, that's for sure. Keeps you in that deep end anyway, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Next I see Bill Pruitt.
Hey, Bill Pruitt. I am from LaGrange, Georgia. I am recently retired and looking to add supplements. And I'm just sort of here to get some hints and pick up, and so that I won't overburden our chapter genealogist with a lot of stuff.
Gotcha. Wonderful. So let's see. Next I see Linda Brown.
Hi, I'm from Illinois, and I've been working on things for probably about 12 years, since my first granddaughter was born, and wanting to get all that info mostly for her. I found a couple Patriots in our line so far, and most of the blocks I hit are on my husband's side of the family. I really don't have any resources. His dad was the youngest of 12, and they all passed before I ever had a chance to talk with them. So I'm just whittling away when I have time.
Right along. Gotcha. And
What
then
part of Illinois, Linda?
Pardon?
What part of Illinois?
I'm in Lockport, about 40 miles south of Chicago.
I'm from Southern Illinois.
Ah, okay.
Never mind.
there you go.
I live in Northern Illinois, and I'm working on some of, actually my husband's part here. I have my own Patriot for DAR, where I'm a member, but I'm hitting one of the brick walls. We just have to prove one man, and everything will connect to 2 different Patriots, but we can't seem to find anything on him. We do have someone who went in on those Patriots back in 1946, and it said they had Bible records. I'm wondering if you keep those records for that long ago.
Gotcha. Okay. Wonderful. Welcome. All right. I'm going to move on. Charles, you can always pick up at the end if you want to. B-Sag is next. There we go. You're unmuted. Good.
My name is Jim, and I'm from Central Florida SAR. I help out the genealogist and registrar there. So I guess my brick wall is I want to find out how I can correct my Patriots records at SAR.
Gotcha.
Okay. That's my brick wall. I need to get get it corrected on that.
Oh,
I mean, he's in, but somehow the records are pointing the wrong direction with another patriot the same name.
oh, okay. So
So
hold
that's
that
my
thought.
brief thought.
Yeah, I was gonna say, hold that thought. We'll probably ask our 2 genealogists, see if they can give us some insight on that in just a minute.
Oh, please. Thank you.
Next, we do have Renato De Luca, but he has told us he's joining us from Brazil, and he wants to kind of listen into it today. But that's wonderful. We went international today, so welcome, Renato. And Doma Cavelli, I don't know if you wanted to introduce yourself. You're next on the list. Again, it's optional. It's not mandatory.
Oh, hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I just I just started out looking at some stuff, and I stumbled upon the Sons of the American Revolution, and I had some help from somebody tracing my lineage to lots of patriots actually, and I'm very interested in getting involved. Some of them being like Isaac Miller in particular, or Ichabod Miller. And I'm just starting out. It's funny that most of you are from Illinois, because I was actually born in Naperville, Illinois.
Where are you now?
Sarasota, Florida.
Sarasota, Florida. Wow. Now, so you haven't joined yet, but you're on your journey, right? You're on your way to get in, or have you joined already?
Yeah, I'm actually getting some birth certificates and stuff together for the person that is that I'm applying to.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Oh, and my actual name is Dominic. Sorry.
Okay.
I don't know why it still says that.
Well, welcome, Dominic. Thank you for coming. Next, I see Melissa Clevenger.
Hi, I'm from the Virginias. I am a DAR, Fort Loudon chapter, Winchester, Virginia. I'm supposed to be at the state conference this weekend, but as I was packing and leaving to go out the door, I tested positive for COVID. So, no, it's crazy. I just thought I wasn't feeling great, and I thought, let me just test real quick so I don't expose 450 people, and was shocked when it was positive. So I thought I'd make use of time and see what you all are up to and see what I can learn.
Wonderful. Well, their loss is our gain. So I'm sorry you can't attend that, but we're so glad to have you.
Thank you.
The last one on the list I see is a phone number. All right. So we've done our introductions, and I think, let's see. I'm going to start out by asking a question of our staff genealogists since they are here. And as far as resources go, I guess you would say, what are the top things you think you use on a daily basis? I mean, as far as we're going to prove any kind of service, military, we talk about pensions a lot, right? Proving patriotic service, what kind of resources come to mind? And you guys can throw in some obscure stuff there that we lay genealogists may not have heard of, but you guys deal with all the time.
All right, I guess I'll go. So both of us are just like, who's going to go first? So yeah, on a daily basis, we see on applications that are coming in to SAR, of course, we see military service, patriotic service, and civil service. Each one of those are kind of an umbrella under which other services fall. So patriotic service can be paying a supply tax, or defending a fort, or giving 2 beefs of supplies, whatever that supply may have been, and being reimbursed for it. And then there's other ones within that service. And then civil service is where I always think of that as more where you've been voted in by your local inhabitants, you know, the people in a town, the people in a county, and you're doing some type of service, whether it be a juror on a committee of safety of some sort, that type stuff, a judge, that type, you know, fun stuff. And then of course, then there's the military service, which is where you're going to run into your pension files and, you know, your military roles, muster roles, that type of fun stuff. Probably the one quirky one that I really like throwing out there that a lot of people don't know about, or if they do, they really kind of don't really think about it, is there are some states, North Carolina is the one that specifically pops in my head, where if they started the land grant process by entering a claim for a land grant. And when they did that, they had to take the oath of allegiance. And it's through a very specific set of years, 1778 to 1783. And that taking of that allegiance qualifies them for patriotic service. So that's one that not a lot of people, and the only reason why it popped in my head is because I've actually got a member right now that his ancestor has been flagged, meaning he was at one time approved. And now because of subsequent applications, they figured out, oh, this person isn't really the one that did the service, somebody else did. So he's now got an ancestor that he cannot get an actual service for. So we're trying to find services that we know specifically are his ancestor. And that's one of them I threw out to him of like, let's look into these land grants and see if we can find something for that ancestor. So those are kind of the ones that I use on a daily basis.
So before Bill answers, I'm curious about the terms patriotic and civil service. Is this something that you think has developed more in the lineage society system as far as designating the two?
I think so. I mean, I know for SAR capabilities, we mirror a lot of what DAR has said for whatever rhyme or reason, mainly because they came about at the same time. But yeah, I think that's really just an umbrella terminology for all of these, just so that they could categorize them into something to make them a little bit more manageable.
Gotcha.
If you take a look at the SAR Genealogy Policy Manual, it divides services into military, civil, and patriotic, and then it breaks down each. It's pretty well organized. So take a look at that, and that will give you a good idea of the scope and the details under the scope.
Great. Absolutely. And that's the manual. Can they get to that to the main site? You don't have to be a member, or is that something behind the member wall?
Anybody can take a look at it.
Great. So SAR.org, everybody, don't forget, under the genealogy section. Bill, do you have any little tips you'd like to give us?
Well, just a couple little things to add to what Deborah was saying. Like with the civil service, you've got state level and you've got continental level. If you were directly serving for the leaders of the country at the time, and then you've got the local service and the various like tax collectors and constables and those types of elected officials, and then in the I love the patriotic service by word, and those are the ones where people are swearing their allegiance to the country so that they can buy land or whatever, like what Deborah was talking about. Those are interesting ones that if you can, if you know that they had to swear allegiance to buy land, and then you can file them buying land, then those can be the breakthrough ones that not everybody thinks about, and those can be really nice to run across.
Great. Yeah, John, go ahead.
That's an example of indirect evidence that the person took the oath of allegiance. The states really were tough on those who would not take the oath of allegiance. And the North Carolina law requiring the oath in order to get land to get a land entry is just one example. Virginia had a similar law for land on the western waters. And I recently provided Cheri with some old journal articles stating from 1901 and 1902, identifying those who were given certificates in Monongalia County. I have a supplemental on one of my 3 female ancestors. In Virginia, in order to file suit for legally, you had to take the oath of allegiance. And page 1 of the law laid out the requirements that men had to take the oath. Page 2 talked about any person rather than any man. And I have a female ancestor who filed about 5 suits for debt after her husband died. And that's indirect evidence that she took the oath of allegiance.
Wow.
I have a paper at dcsar.org on oaths of allegiance detailing indirect service for the 14 states. Now, in case you're wondering what the 14th state was, it was Vermont. Vermont made the mistake of declaring independence not only from Great Britain, but also from New York and Massachusetts. In fact, they invaded some of the other towns that Massachusetts thought were it. So the Continental Congress wasn't about to admit them.
Wow. And John's providing, he's been scanning a lot of other materials too. We're working on getting those on our new library's website, which is library.sar.org. We're going to have those under the resources, one of the resources tabs there. So we're kind of redesigning that a little bit. And John, if you want to tell them a little bit about what you've been doing.
Sure. I've been doing a fair amount of Maryland research as well as some Virginia research. I was trying to sort out the 5 different John Gaithers who were adults in Maryland in the 1770s. DAR still has them mixed up. They do realize that my John Gaither did not do what previous ladies had said he did. So I decided I would work on a paper sorting out the 5 John Gaithers. And one of the documents that I discovered or I found was the Montgomery County, Maryland court record book for 1777 to 1781. And from my research back in the 80s, I knew that there were oaths of allegiance in this book. So I took another look at them. And it turns out that what they did was they recorded the returns in the court record book. And there are 2 returns of oaths of allegiance that were not separately filed with the state, or at least if they were filed, they're not extant. So this document has over 300 names of men who took the oath of allegiance in Montgomery County that have previously escaped detention.
Wow.
Right after this, there's another set of documents for the 1000s of Montgomery County. It's the 1778 state enumeration for men 18 and older. And the 1778 census was known to be extant for 3 counties. This makes county number 4. It had been overlooked all of these years. So I've provided Cheri with images of the original documents. I wrote an introduction citing the law that mandated all this. It's actually the same law for both oaths of allegiance in Maryland and for the 1778 state enumeration. they were wanting to identify those who did not take the oath of allegiance so they could make sure that they were treble taxed and could not file suits in debt, suits for debt in Maryland. They were similar to Virginia and so on. So these are new records.
That's fantastic. Yes.
Now, in terms of Virginia, what I'm doing, Bill Schwetke and I are taking a look at what tax records, land tax and personal property tax, are not at familysearch.org. And yesterday, Bill scanned some of the land tax records that are not available. And he and I are going to do as Virginians, are going to do the trips to Library of Virginia to get the missing ones scanned. We're not going to duplicate what's already available for free at familysearch.org.
Fantastic. And yes, those are primary sources, primary source scans that he's talking about. So those will be new additions to our resources section, and those will be freely available for anybody to access once we get those up. Might take me another week to get some of these up, and I know John is gathering some more for us and everything. Let's see. I am going to break for a second and I did want to show you guys one thing in the latest, for those of you members and have access to our magazine, the latest issue that we have, there's a couple things in there. It does talk about our Patriot research system that we have from the SAR. I can pinpoint my camera correctly, and which is really great. But despite the article, the Patriot, the PRS, that is something that's accessible by anyone. You don't have to be a member. It's much like the DAR GRS, that's open as well for people to research. So again, and the PRS is actually going one step further, and they are trying to enter a lot more information on biographies of any patriots. It's not necessarily tied to membership, or patriots that are connected to a member. Sometimes they go, they'll fill in those biographies of anyone that they come across, or a patriot that comes to their attention. And also, and keep in mind too, this, even if you're not a member, let's say all you ladies out there, the DAR, keep in mind too that the SAR magazine is usually picked up by a lot of libraries out there. So libraries in your area will usually have a copy of this that you can access. And another one too, this was the inaugural article I noticed. The Genealogy Corner has now launched, which is from the genealogy department. So Denise Hall, the genealogy manager of the department, has written a nice little article here, and it's talking about using DAR applications as proof for SAR applications, which is something that happens quite a lot. I don't know if you two have had a chance to read that or anything, but yes, you think yes. Okay, if you guys want to kind of just briefly kind of give them a little bit of translate all of this down to a little without reading the article at this time, just because there's a lot there and it is kind of complicated. So and there's dates even and all this kind of stuff. So kind of give us a little synopsis of what she's talking about.
Yeah, that's something that actually is returning. Years ago, and I say years ago, probably about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we had that type of article showing up in the magazine, or even something published by the national headquarters, just going out to the states. And just because of time constraints and employee constraints of our time, she had to stop doing that. But really the reason why she wanted to make that her first article is because we do get so many DAR applications, and people get confused on what does it even mean? Are there verification marks? What do those mean? Is that something that's helpful? Why we even want to make sure that they're there? But she also wanted to just show people how to print them, which sounds very rudimentary, but being able to know that it's an actual record copy as opposed to something that is not is very important, because we have the guidelines that have been approved by the genealogy committee of what we have to, what we can accept and what we cannot accept. That's not us making those rules. That's the committee. And so we have been seeing enough of these little problems that she thought that this article would be a good thing. Now I'm going to, in full disclosure, she wrote that article. I read it. And when I saw it in the magazine, I was like, oh, look, there it is. Oh, yeah, good. Because she had me read it and proofread it and kind of go over everything. But it was supposed to have been in the magazine before this one.
Oh.
So it's like 3 months, 4 months past now, and I'm totally blanking on what.
If you proofread it, you would, oh, great, it would be all in your head. No, it's gone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So, but I mean, she basically is just trying to, get it down to the everybody language of, this is what we're looking for. It has to have these verification marks on it. If it is flagged, and we use that word flagged, redlined, whatever verbiage you want to use by DAR, that needs to have a double look at it, because there are situations where those red lines or flags don't affect the application that they're actually turning it in on. And then there's other ones where it's completely shut down the service or the lineage or whatever. So it really needs to kind of be looked at and make sure that it's not going to stop it once it gets to us.
So let me ask one question real quick about record copies. So record copies, I mean, the difference basically is a record copy that's something official that comes from DAR that's saying, okay, this is a record copy. Now, I'm assuming that the date of a record copy would be important, would it not? Because I could have a record copy that I ordered 20 years ago, but in the meantime, there could be a problem with that Patriot that's come forward. So do you guys have a date limit or a window of?
We like to see the latest one if possible, but we also know that there's situations where maybe that application from 20 years ago is the very lineage that you need.
Sure.
And then what we look at, I always think of things as kind of a flow chart in my head. So you start out with, do I have a DAR paper? And then if yes, okay, what year was it done? And then you just kind of keep going down from there. So does it have verification marks on it? If it's an application from 1907 or even 1957, it may not have verification marks on it. And those are what we need, because we don't have the documentation that DAR had in their hand at the time that they were reviewing that application.
Right.
All we have is that application to tell us what they saw. Was that lineage proven? Was it not? So, I don't want to give a date, because even DAR doesn't really have a date certain, because they take every one of their applications on a case-by-case basis, because some of them that were submitted and approved in 1959 or 60, they're better than the ones that were approved, a year ago, because maybe they have better documentation or more primary source material. So
yeah, no, that's great. That's really good. I think that's helpful information. Yeah. Did Dominic, did you want to ask a question? I know it keeps going to your block, so I wonder if you had a question.
Yeah, I think some of the questions are being answered for me, because I found through other lineages that there were older applications that were approved for the Sons of the American Revolution. So is that recommended to go through that avenue?
that it can be. It depends on when you say older, because that's a relative term. For some people, for me, an older application would be 1910. But for somebody else, that may be a 2010 application. So it really depends on the time frame that you're talking about when you say older, and it depends on what you're using it for. Are you using it for the firsthand knowledge of the applicant, because that's the only place you can prove his birth date? and maybe who his parents are. We've used those 1905, 1910 applications for that reason. Or is it because you're wanting to use it for 5 generations and all he used was a sister's DAR paper? So it really, you look at, it's just like with any source, you really need to fine tune and look at everything that's on that application to see how much you're going to use it for and what type of source did they use. So,
Okay. Would it be
Dominic,
benefit? Yeah.
it would also, you also should be aware that over time, the kind of service that men would apply on has changed. I did a spot check for applications in the first half of the 1970s, and virtually all of them were on military service. Civil service and patriotic service were largely ignored back then. They weren't even on people's radar. So the more recent applications tend to get into the other services that were overlooked by previous generations.
Okay. Would it be beneficial to supply like multiple or just focus on one?
multiple applications, is that what you're talking about?
Could I prove multiple lineages with one application, basically?
Well, each application, if you will, is its own pot, if you want to look at it like that. Every one of those, from you to that patriot ancestor is considered one lineage. And like, once you become a member, then you can do the additional ancestors. So you may have 5 ancestors that you found so far that did, some type of service, but every application can only have one ancestor for us to look at.
Okay.
And then, once you get that first one approved, you'll get a national number, and then every subsequent application after that, you could branch off and do, other ancestors.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think you're coming back.
Okay, so you don't have to reprove what you've already proved for previous applications. You can cite that application, and if you have discovered more information about the person, such as a precise date of death, you can add that to the new application and get that on record.
And I'm
Okay.
going to ask the clarification question there. So, guys, what happens when there is a father and son and they both fought? Do you still have to turn in the extra person as a supplemental eventually? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. A strategy that I have followed is that I will go for the father if I have a solid lineage. And that way, when I submit the son, all I have to do is for the lineage is cite the father and then the son service.
It's all done. Yeah.
And there are some older applications, again, talking, about the 1900s, 1910s, that when you see those applications, they will actually have 2 or even 3 ancestors listed on them. From where back then they didn't have a guideline, I guess, or a policy or whatever, that you had to have one application per ancestor. There are some of them that actually have multiple ancestors on them. So, which is really weird to me, but
Bulk. That's getting approved in bulk. Multiple metals.
What you're saying is basically that to make the corrections is any future supplemental applications, you can make the corrections on that application from the original.
And I had written down your question about the correct of the record on the SAR from where you were doing your introduction. And I was going to ask you, from what John's talking about is, let's say you're going from yourself to John Smith. Let's just throw that out. And within that lineage, you may not have had a death certificate or an exact place of death or whatever. And so we went ahead and got that approved. And now you're going to John Smith Sr., where you're going through the exact same lineage. And now you found those documents for Gen 4, 5, 6. What John's talking about is now supplying that for the same same lineage part, but now you've got the exact death date or birthplace or whatever. That's where you can do those documents in that new application, and that way we know now that lineage, we've added all that information. But if you're talking about wanting to correct a patriot, that's something totally different.
Yeah, mine's a patriot because I'll give you the actual is the SAR database shows the patriot from Chester County, Pennsylvania, when my patriot is actually did a service in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So that's what I don't know how to correct the database at SAR to the correct patriot.
So is it because they've actually got an application approved on him? So
The one in Chester County is, from my understanding, is very old, past the 1970s, later in the 1970s. So I don't know what happened is how that, how it got on there. And I just want to, I guess, get it corrected.
What's the patriot's name?
Robert,
or what's your national number? One of the two.
I can tell you in a minute.
Okay, while you're looking that up, if you could email the information to me, I am on the subcommittee on flagging of the genealogy committee. And this is the sort of thing that we are interested in as we try to define the scope of what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah. My national number is 220.
Right. Robert Robinson is the patriot.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And in the database, it says that he's from the Chester County, Robert Robinson. But actually, I've proven everything for a Lancaster County, Robert Robinson.
So one thing to point out. So you're talking about the Patriot Research System, right? That's what you're looking at?
Yes.
Okay. One thing for users out there, since other people will be watching this later, there are codes underneath the name of Patriots that will tell us where some of the information comes from, i.e. whether it's associated with a application or whatnot. But in this case, this is being associated with your Patriot, like your specific Patriot, which is tied to your application, right? To your membership.
Yes. Yeah, it's just I think it's just changing the database. I mean, everything in the database is correct except for like you said, the Chester says Chester County and the service under Chester County.
Your application does say Westmoreland County.
Yes.
And
Westmoreland
the
County,
PRS,
Lancaster County, yes.
And the PRS on the Robert Robinson shows shows Westmoreland County. But I see where it's got Captain Samuel Evans, Colonel Evan Evans, 2nd Battalion, Chester County Militia.
Yes, that's what's not correct. That's how I wasn't sure how that got tied in there.
So here's what ends up happening, and it's not a perfect system, but it is the system that is in place as of right now. So when I'm sitting here looking at the Patriot Research System, it has not only a P number that they've assigned it, but there's also a DAR ancestor number.
Yes.
And so the people that are doing the Patriot Research System, they are, trying to marry up information from all of these different sources in order to try to give us a complete picture as possible. And sometimes in that marrying up, I think they get things a little confused. And so I'm thinking, because they've got yours dying in 1830 on the PRS, it's got 1836 in Indiana, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And then the DAR has him dying in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And I'm wondering if somehow they've married two different guys with the same name.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Certainly, and that's something within the PRS where they're pulling information from the DAR GRS and maybe not having realized that there are two different guys. And I don't know that this is just from very.
Yeah, you're on the right track, I think.
Yeah, there's another source of that kind of error. In the old days, people would do simple name matching. They would find the name of an ancestor who did service and say, oh, that's my man, but not realize that there were two men of the same name. For example, I was helping a gentleman get a supplemental on a man who served in what is now West Virginia. And there were previously approved applications for him. But I looked at the service and I thought, well, gee, that part of West Virginia didn't provide a whole lot of Continental troops. I wonder what the story is. It turned out that this man was a captain and he lived long enough to be a pensioner. And he lived and served in Bedford County, Virginia, which is no place close to West Virginia. So I had to go looking for legitimate service for the right part of what was then Virginia. Found it, and he got a supplemental.
I was helping a gentleman, the same thing as I ran into the same situation, only in my case, we couldn't tie into the correct Patriot.
So now,
okay, yeah.
potentially,
Whatever I need to do to make that correction, or
and
just let me know.
So John has asked if you would email him the information. He's going to look into getting that. You said they're interested in that, so somehow getting that resolved potentially. If John, if you want to put your email in the chat box, that way.
Oh, okay.
That way he can contact you directly, because that's something I don't want to put on the video, on the final version of the video.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
By the way, when you asked me what research I was doing, I forgot to mention a significant document that I have sent to Cheri for posting. Another document that I had used some time ago but hadn't really studied is in the Maryland State Archives, is entitled A List of Civil Officers in the State of Maryland. It starts in 1777 and I guess goes into the 1790s. So I scanned up through 1783, which is from pages 1 through 158 of civil appointments in the state of Maryland. Not only state officers, but county officers. And it includes not only the big wigs like the governors, but gets down to men who were appointed to do things like implement raising a battalion of Continentals in a particular county. 158 pages worth of civil appointments. Cheri has this.
Yep, that's going to go up on our site. Hopefully soon, very soon. Couple of things that just came up in the conversations that I think we should talk about for a minute. So we mentioned, number one, we mentioned the pensions. Does somebody want to go over the difference between the 1818 and 18, what is it? Is it 32 or 30? Yeah, 32. Talk about the difference. Anybody want to cover that subject?
Bill, you go ahead.
I'm not that strong on those.
I'm just joking. I knew you weren't.
She
I'm
said,
not that
strong. I can jump in if nobody else wants to, but if Deborah, you want to, I'll let you go.
I'll let me try it, and then when I don't get into, maybe you can follow up on. So there's been pension laws since actually before the war stopped. And I think the earliest one was like 1779 or 80. But the 1818 one was a real big one because they ended up saying specifically what they had to do. There was, just like with everything, there was laws within or guidelines within that of what you had to be, how long you had to serve, what type of service you would have had to have given. And then, so there was a lot of people that didn't qualify because maybe they didn't serve long enough. And then they, as of course, just with any pension, as they started seeing more and more people die off and knowing that they weren't going to have to pay out as much. This is me. That's my part.
Political commentary.
Yeah, that's my commentary on it. And that knowing that, okay, well, they're getting older and they absolutely have to have this, and let's go ahead and extend and expand what they could have done. How long did they have to do would not have been as long. So in 1832, there was less of a requirement. And I think even you didn't have to be in dire straits as you did in the first one.
Yeah, 1818, you had to kind of prove that you were financially destitute or you were in great need.
I have 1 cow and 7,
Yes, my ancestor totally lied about it to get it, but yes, he said he was destitute anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
There were three key acts. The first was 1818, which was limited to continental service. Militia service didn't count. And in 1820, they decided they were paying out too much money, so they amended the law to require a means test. And that's when they suspended a whole lot of pensioners because they had too much money. 1832, militia qualified, but you had to have 6 months service or longer. So a lot of men who did serve still did not qualify in 1832. They eventually made things more liberal for the widows, especially in the late 1840s, shortening the 6-month requirement substantially. But that was after the soldiers had largely died off.
So when were the widows? So I'm assuming children are never in this, but widows, when did widows qualify to get anything?
The big act there was 1836, correct,
Okay.
Deborah?
I think so, yeah. And heirs were allowed to
okay.
Yeah, but I think that one may even be later. And again, I don't have those memorized. We usually do a cheat sheet of like going.
I know the heirs one does exist. I've seen it, but I've never actually had an application in the year that I've been at SAR. I've not had.
Did they have to be like children, like underage, like they can be of legal age?
Children.
Right? Okay,
Yeah, and I think they may have even had to have been like the parents were the sole support of the heir. There was something very specific about it. Yeah.
Now, there were also state pensions before there were federal pensions for men who were seriously disabled or killed in action.
Very nice.
Yeah. So like I know Virginia had a couple state pensions, and I think seems like Connecticut. I don't know why that sticks in my head, but it seems like there was, I do know that there were state pensions, like John said. So
okay, that's great. So, and finding pensions, a lot of us go to Fold 3. That's one place. National Archives, technically that's where they pull a lot of them from, don't they?
Yes.
Fold 3.
And Fold 3 Ancestry has different ones where that they've done the specified and unspecified, and those are where years ago during the 30s, I believe it was, that of course when FDR was doing all of his trying to get people working, that they started a lot of these different little projects. And one of them was them going through and kind of pulling out the useful information, the biographical or genealogical information, and having those pensions in what they called, I think it's specified, isn't it, John? Is it specified, or it's where that it's not the entire packet for the pension?
Oh, yeah, people could order the 10 key documents.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the ones where sometimes people will see that and they'll think that's all there is, when in fact it may be another 70 pages because of every piece of paper that was created by that pension has been, scanned or microfilmed or whatever. But they don't want to send that out because most people don't find that useful. But if you are wanting a very specific thing, you're wanting to maybe track an ancestor or whatever, all of those components can be useful. So getting the full pension packet can be useful. Seems like there's also a Southern where they've transcribed, a website where they've actually transcribed.
The Southern campaigns.
Yes.
Yes. Southern
I
Maine.
Yeah, they did a good job on that. The Library of Virginia has online a lot of the applications for bounty land, and that includes applications in the 1840s and 50s by descendants. South Carolina has, I think this is online, the audited accounts. And the thing about the audited accounts is you can wind up with multiple soldiers of the same name in the same file. These are particularly valuable because they get into the specifics of the service, and you can identify the county frequently from which the man served, whereas you cannot from all the published stub indents that are more widely known because they're in bound books.
Real quick, let me do a share screen to show you. Actually, this is one that we did go ahead and put into the landing page that if you visit the library, you do see this. But yes, the Southern Campaigns, Revolutionary War pensions. This is something anyone can access this from home for free. And the best way I would say, it says revwarapps.org. So revwarapps.org. What's fantastic is that little alphabet is usually within reach very quickly. You could just pick one and you can go down and then you can just pick on a guy. I was kind of looking for one of my guys. Where is he? Woo. Oh, there he is. I already clicked on him once. So, and then it comes up in PDF format. Yes, so this makes it so much easier to read. So if you're a patriot, would have filed a pension in the southern part of the colonies or the states, that there it could have been transcribed and in this site. What I do love is if there is a signature that goes with him, they did capture that signature and put it in the document, which is a lovely little nugget. I love seeing that. Yeah, this one was really, really large. I'm twice descended from Captain Henry Connolly, and his deposition is so long because he gives so many details about, especially they said a lot of scholars will cite his deposition because it gives so many details. They said it's the best account of the Battle of Cowpens that is out there, especially in a pension, and so they cite his quite a lot. So that is just what one of them looks like. And so you go back and you really, you can always click on another one, but like I said, that alphabet is always right there. So you can just go to another one, and it's really fantastic. The codes usually are tied to states, I believe, but I can't remember. Like there's Virginia, but I can't remember what all of this is. But yeah, they're wonderful. They're just random. They're just really great. Again, so easy to read. But yeah,
Cheri, is my recollection correct that you can do a name search of all the pensions to see if anybody mentioned your ancestor?
On that site. Let me see.
on that site.
Let's go
You
back.
can do that at fold 3 for federal pensions.
Oh, see, that would be fantastic because, yes, that's one of the ways. I don't want to say, let's go back up. Search feature to access the power, even in these cases where application is not provided for your soldier. Almost all users have to learn by trial and error. I can't read. Let's see. Let me get this out of the way. Access all those names, known captains, battles, relatives, locales, streams. So yeah, it looks like you can search from various variables in these applications, which is wonderful. And shoot, there was something else I was going to point out about this. But that does happen. It's almost like sometimes it does include the ones, by the way, that were declined as well. So, just if they file, even if they didn't make it, sometimes the details they put in there, now sometimes the details might be wrong, might be fraudulent on purpose. However, especially because of the ones declined, but sometimes there's some really great genealogical clues in there that you can pick up so that even if they didn't qualify for pension, but they did do some service, yeah, that information can be included in those. So those are really great. Like I said, that's one for free from home. I'm going to open up for any questions right now. Otherwise, I have another direction we can go in, but any quick questions while we...
I had one. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yes.
I just wanted to say that I can't remember if it's on my line or my husband's line without looking it up. But one of us descends from Henry Conley too. So that was exciting to hear you mention that. And I'm going to go look at that page as soon as this is over with.
Yes, so, you will love it. It's a great...
It is RevWarApps.com, right?
.org.
.org. Okay.
.org. That's a great... You'll love it.
All right. I can't wait to go looking. Thank you.
My dad, who has since passed, he was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and he used to teach military history out at Fort Sill. And he used to, one of the major sections he would teach was on the Battle of Cowpens. And he had no idea that he was descended from Henry Conley that fought at the battle until later on, many, many years later. I was like, well, have you heard of Henry Conley? I'm like, yeah, you are doubly descended from him. So both his grandmother and his grandfather were descended from Henry Conley. It was an Eastern Kentucky thing. That was one of my first big shocks as I was researching. I was only about, 16, maybe 18. And my grandmother had a beautiful giant pedigree chart she had just put together because she took a genealogy class and she traced back her tree. And I was super excited to find a Revolutionary captain on one of them. And then I traced the other line and went, oh, it's another captain. No, it's the same captain. Okay. So yeah, but no, he actually, it's interesting. He had twin sons and we are descended from each one of the twins. So yeah, good time.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm doing research for a friend, actually the Chamberlains, and an odd name I find, Bundy, in North Carolina, Virginia. They've started out in the very corner near the ocean.
Pasquotank County.
Yeah, yes. But they ended up in... We
may be cousins.
Yeah, well, it's not for me, but it's for a very close friend of my son's. Chris, they ended up in Carabas County. I'll probably say that wrong. Anyway, my difficulty in trying to find any of, in the archives and stuff, I've been looking for military records to see if there's any from the Revolutionary War, because the boys were born in like the late 1795, something like that, in North Carolina. Yet I suspect who his father is, but I can't prove it at this point. But I was frustrated because I could not really find, because there is no 1790 census records, right, in Virginia, because they were destroyed. But I'm looking under everything I could think of to try and find the Chamberlains, and I'm coming up with Chambers, but no Chamberlains. And the Bundys are probably even worse, because sometimes there's spelled with a Y or an I. I mean, I did find one, like you say, a really nice document on a Chamberlain, but at this point, can't put him with the rest of them. Any suggestions?
So
Yeah,
this-
at SAR.org, there is a Bundy bio that I wrote documenting the service of my branch of the Bundy family. The other Bundys in Pasquotank County are going to be much harder to prove because they were all Quakers.
Yeah, and these guys weren't Quakers from
Yeah,
everything I gather, but that's good to know. I saw that too.
Yeah,
But you
I
have a
would
Bundy,
recommend.
huh?
I would recommend that you take a look at the tax lists and
Okay.
see if any of there are good tax lists extant for Pasquotank County. Trouble is, a lot of them are on paper. They're not available on microfilm even.
Yeah, that's what sucks for me being in Washington and trying to do East Coast research. Yeah,
Well,
and I find old newspapers. That's kind
You
of
have
cool.
my email address. Shoot me an email with the details, and I will see if there's anything on my flash drive, or rather on my computer, that might help on the Bundys.
And I don't have your email. I'm sorry.
I put it on the chat.
It's in the chat.
Okay, I'll check it from there. Thank you.
Which actually segues very well into one of the directions I kind of wanted to talk about for a second. The difference between Continental and militia and the records available in order to prove that they did. Can we talk about the problem with some of the militia records versus the main army? Now, Captain Conley was actually militia, and they accepted him for a pension anyway, but they said because he had so many details that corroborated all of this, and his unit was swept up into some of the larger units, that he qualified, it was fine, but militia can be a little bit harder to prove. And why would that be? Does anyone want to address that?
You can, depending on the state, there are some resources that you can get to, like Massachusetts Soldiers and Sailors are a possibility, and adjutant general reports out of the various states can be a useful tool to help you get into those militias and local reports and that kind of stuff, and getting at the state level instead of out at the continental level.
Right. So the records of militia, those were never transferred over to, like, say, National Archives, correct?
Correct.
Because those were,
they were just local records or state records, and they weren't a national record to be sent up to the National Archives. And so you have to get with like historical societies of the particular states, or research libraries that have the various publications that the states did themselves, that provided various lists of the types of service that the various guys did and what time periods, because you got payroll and you have lots of different lists. You got to feed the guys, you've got to pay them eventually, and so there's various lists and various accountings of in the various states of all. Well, I won't say all, because some of them have been destroyed, but a lot of the guys out there that had service, you can find those records in books that the states themselves have actually published,
or even in the county records.
Yep.
Great. Which reminds us that, because a lot of people want to prove a lot of the stuff through, like, Fold 3, that Fold 3 would not have caught necessarily militia records. And it might take a lot of location related research in order to dig up those militia records. And so if you can't find your soldier, what someone you think would have been of the age and would have fought, and you're not finding them in the regular Don't Give Up, that they might have been, or they could have been fighting for the other side.
Yeah, and that's something that you have to be careful of with your civil service too. They could be with the Tories, and so you got to think about where they're serving. Who are they serving? Are they the British government, or are they us? You got to be careful on that. Oh, and one thing on Patriotic Service that I have to go back to. one of my early apps that I pulled out of a drawer has to do with letters of marque. And so owning a ship or captaining or crewing a ship during the Revolution, and you had a letter of marque from the Continental Army, then that would be a Patriotic Service qualifier.
So mark and
being
they
commissioned by the Continental government to fight for them, because we didn't really own that many ships. It was all privateers, and that's where the letter of marque comes in. And letter of marque gets you Patriotic Service.
Is it MARK or MARQ?
MARQUE. Letter of marque.
Got it.
And don't overlook the states, because the states also did that sort of thing and had responsibility for process for carrying on the war.
Yep.
And Chris, just to kind of let you know, I was thinking about Family Search. Family Search actually has the Pasquotank County tax list digitized. So from 1735 to 1904, I don't know that they're all extant, but they do have the, I'm sitting here looking at one from 1779. So, and it looks like they even have them before and after. So you may be able to find them and follow him in those tax lists.
Yeah, because I know then that first part, they were there in the 1800 census. And then by the time 1830 they rolled around, they were clean over in, well, it had a previous name. Now I can't remember it. Anyway, Carabas. I can never say that word. And then they stayed there 10 years and just went to Indiana. Actually, Illinois, bottom of Illinois.
Well, of course. But
Yeah, free
Are you
land.
talking about the Chamberlains or the Bundys?
The Chamberlains.
Okay, because one of the branches of the Bundy family wound up in Illinois very early. In fact, the man did have Revolutionary service. When you are looking at the tax list, be sure you also look at the SAR report on what tax laws and tax lists qualify. Because because some of the taxes do not qualify as evidence of Revolutionary service. Others do.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that with other wars, how I think that I love looking at these things because I was doing some research for a friend, and the gentleman that was in the Civil War turned right around and went off to war, came back, went off to war again because he deserted and never came home. And that was their great-great-grandfather. As it turned out, when I went to look for his records, I got like 4 reams of paper that essentially was drawn out, telling such detail about the fact that all those things I said, but the bigger part of it was the denial for the first family to have those benefits because someone had already gotten the benefits. And that's when they found out they had 2 families from the same father, the one that never came home. So that's why I love picking this stuff up. I mean, it's like putting together a big, huge puzzle, and boy, does that make me happy. So I'll try that one, and I'll figure it out. I didn't think of even looking there, to tell you the truth, John, at all. I mean, I usually start out with archives and any kind of information I can find first, and then and if I'm frustrated, then I kind of go there. But I spend a lot of time on Hatha and a lot of those too to pick up books, and none of these guys are in the books.
Also at full 3 are the Revolutionary pay vouchers issued by North Carolina. And those are at the state level rather than the county level. So by all means, take a look at it. And
you said they're on full 3?
No, they're at familysearch.org.
Okay.
Familysearch.org. If I said full 3, that was a mistake.
No. My brain went there faster. Okay, got it. Thanks.
So I have a question about what some of the things that I have seen, not only what John is turning into me when you're talking about civil service, and then what Bill just said that it could be civil service for the other side. What would that look like? how would you determine what is on the patriotic side civil service versus the loyalist side? And how would you tell?
Verbiage.
Yeah,
Verbiage. Okay.
absolutely.
Verbiage as a record.
Okay.
I had an application years ago that they were very happy to be able to show me that their ancestor signed this petition. And it was South Carolina and it was Charleston and it was a wonderful, you know, and here's this beautiful record. And I'm reading it and I'm like, it was where the inhabitants of Charleston was turning over. Yes, you can come and get Charleston, Mr. British man, and come in. We welcome you into our city. And I was just like, oh, that's not, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's all about, it's just all about the verbiage that's there, you know.
So general civil service, like general service, civil service might be hard to tell. That, like, if they're just doing a general duty, like let's say, oh gosh, give me an example, John, of some of the stuff that you're finding in the list. I literally looked at them the other day. I can't remember some of the categories they were falling under.
He's a juror, he's a judge.
Yes, things like that.
You know, fence sitter, fence viewer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, just the verbiage and reading what that record says, not just that page of it, maybe even the page or two before, in order to be able to kind of get a context of what that record is actually stating.
Well, would that then also indicate that you need to really research the location heavily, because to see what
that's what I was getting ready to say. You know, like
what
Long Island,
that-
you got to be very careful of Long Island because it changed hands, and you got to be very. I've had applications come through with Long Island stuff, and I'm like, yeah, you're going to have to straighten this out because he could have served either side.
Matter of fact, DAR has a very strong verbiage in their publications where it helps, you know, people doing the application. One of them, it's 3 volumes, and the 3rd volume is service. And for for Long Island, they're just like, oh, you've got to nail it down really good.
Yeah.
So flipping back and forth.
Yep.
Yeah, with Long Island, a lot of them served on both sides at different times.
Yep. Yep. And you have to be very careful. And I mean, technically, I guess as long as they served us last, they qualify.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. That kind of reminds me a little bit of next month. We've got a couple of guests. Rachel Grimes, who's a filmmaker and composer. She researched one of the enslaved people that was brought into Kentucky with Daniel Boone and that group. And then Russell Mahan, who wrote the book, Kentucky Kidnappings and Death March, which was about the attacks on, was it Ruddles Station, Martin's Fort, or Ruddles Fort, Martin Station? I can't remember which one's a station, which one's a fort. But anyway, because those groups were attacked by British forces with Native American forces that were along, it was like a joint attack. So those were attacked. Some people were killed, and then the 2 groups were marched north. What's interesting about some of that is most of the people that would have been victims of that attack would have been probably, you know, you're on the patriotic side, right? You're on the patriot side. This is the British are attacking you, and then you're being marched up to Detroit. Then there were some families that actually switched and joined the British military once they got up there.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's complicated, awkward.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's not that bad up here. I like it. I like the cold weather.
it's fine.
Well, and the ones that marched to Quebec and ended up staying up there.
Yeah.
They deserted and stayed.
Wow. Yeah.
So, it happens.
And I won't reveal the punchline on Russell's theory on that as to why they might have been so quick to kind of do that once they got up there. But yeah, it's fascinating. Fascinating theory. But yeah, and really, really well detailed, actually, really well researched. And so I'm excited about next month's as well. So we're going to kind of continue on because it's basically researching Kentucky frontier at the time, the 18th century during the war. And so how difficult that might be. And so we're going to talk about conditions and all that. But yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting.
Very cool.
Yeah. I have gathered some weird random resources that I have, because I think once, I was generally familiar with revolutionary history more than I was proving service. I mean, I did have a couple of ancestors that are patriots that one I've gotten, the lineage already in, so I'm DAR, but darn Captain Henry Connolly, he still is kind of it's just the Eastern Kentucky records for me. Challenge. But I got two lines I could go with. I haven't went and done that. But one of the words that kind of caught my attention was, it's a title, Stub Entries to Indents. This is out of South Carolina.
Yep.
The word indents, I was like, I had not heard that before. But these are, you guys are shaking your head. You guys want to explain to them what these kind of are? Do you guys remember what they are? You guys remember what they are. I mean, I'm going to, after in the editing process, I'm going to take these and use our new overhead cameras, and I'm going to really show the audience what these look like. But anyway, so these are kind of like claims, right?
Yep.
I mean, isn't that basically
Indentures.
what indents is for?
I gave 500 pounds of beef. Where's my money? So,
yes.
If you find somebody in one of those books, then go to the audited accounts to read the actual claim, because that can give you a clue as to where they were. There were something like 5 men by the name of John Ware in South Carolina during the Revolution. And I found military service for several of them, but I couldn't figure out which one was mine until I went to the audited account, when I found that he was from Chester County.
So audited accounts, where would we find those? Is that something you
South
think-
Carolina State Archives has them online.
Okay. Oh, online. Perfect.
Yeah, I just actually saw them. I was looking last weekend at those. That's kind of cool. I saw I don't know, another T, I would call it. And that's what they were talking about it. I thought it was pretty interesting when they showed the pictures. So I went out and checked it.
And
Thanks for that.
This series generally, the stub entries to indents, yes, ours are also in our catalog, are connected to ebooks. So you can actually read a lot of that online as well. So that's a series you can get to. I always do, and this is one
on archive.org.
Huh?
The books are actually on archive.org.
Yeah, that's where we're linking to. Yeah, that's how we're doing it. Yeah, we haven't scanned them or anything. So, all right, staff genealogists. So what about Draper? Have you guys encountered a whole lot of applications coming in proving anything through Draper? Or is it just kind of supplemental information?
Not a lot. When I do run across it, and I'm going to speak just for myself, when I do, because I usually do supplementals. So I've done almost all of John's 9,000 ancestors.
I've only got 74 proven.
Only 74. Eric
Troutman has 81.
Oh, you gotta try a little harder than that then, don't you, John? You gotta be able to get up to where he is. But where I've run across that is usually Draper, if someone has an ancestor that was in Kentucky early on, they were at one of the forts. Every once in a while, you'll see them use that as their proof of service. But then you'll also see them using it for proof of lineage, because maybe within that letter, someone or his when he's talking to them, interview, they're talking about people, and they may be talking about a third person. I know John Smith and his son, Joseph Smith, that went on to blah, blah, blah. So that's where I've run into them for the most part. Yeah.
Right. That's true. He did, for those not familiar with Draper, Draper collection is housed by University of Wisconsin, but Lyman Copeland Draper went around and interviewed people about basically the Western frontier, any kind of movement. He wanted to document not only those who'd fought in the Revolution, but War of 1812. He was trying to capture the history because think about it, when they settled out west, which I'm talking about west was like Kentucky and, points west, Ohio, all these different places, Tennessee, Virginia. Actually, he doesn't do a whole lot in the Ohio stuff as far as his books, but records. So
well, the Draper manuscripts can give you insights into the nature of service. I have mentioned my John Ware, and a recruiting sergeant gave the explanation of why he and his cohorts enlisted, how the colonel filled the regiment in 3 days. They took a keg of whiskey from a Tory and then went to 2 creeks, and the quote, whiskey-loving Irish all enlisted, including my John Ware.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, y'all. We missed that one.
Yeah. And
funny what you do when you're drunk.
Yeah. Well, he gave information about a charge that were made when the men were inebriated, contrary to orders. And the other valuable thing I found in the Draper manuscripts was I was wondering whether one of my female ancestors was one of the women who went out to get water when the Indians had surrounded the fort in Kentucky. And Draper had interviewed or corresponded with one of the daughters. And it turns out that the husband was in Kentucky at the time, but the rest of the family did not join him until afterwards. So that resolved the question. I found out when the rest of the family got to Kentucky.
So what state was the Ware story with the Irish and the whiskey?
South Carolina.
South Carolina, because
Chester County.
Maybe using that one. I may look that one up because that's a really great story. I love that.
And I'll have to see if I have a Ware bio written. I know I presented it to DCSAR.
That's awesome. Other things, yes. So Draper basically was interviewing people through like mid 19th century.
Yeah, the battle was the Battle of Fishtown Ford.
Okay.
Which was an American victory. They were all but one of the colonels was surprised, but the British officer in charge had not conveyed the plan to his subordinates, and he was severely wounded at the beginning of the battle, and they didn't know what to do.
Wow. So he's trying to document as much as he can. So he did a ton of interviews. He did a lot of times ask about someone's family, their lineage, who they were related to. Some of them provided family Bible records, and he would transcribe the family Bible record in there. So you're looking at least closer generations to who would have fought either one of the wars, actually. And so, yeah, we've had people that I know they proved some stuff through some Bible records and whatnot. And so, yeah, that's a great one. We do have that on microfilm here. Using it is a little tricky. I'm going to do a whole session just present on how to use that and find what you need, because there's no comprehensive index. There's about 6 books you'd have to look through to try to find your ancestor in there, and then there's annotated. But yeah, it's a wonderful resource. I think as we get into towards the 250th, we're going to have to look at Draper, different sources like that a lot more. Yeah. Let's see. And then one of my other ones that I actually do like too. This is kind of a little bit tied, not later on, is tied more to land. Let's talk about real quick. Land, sometimes just awarding land could be a proof, correct? If they didn't file for a pension or you couldn't find stuff, if they're getting awarded land for, and it says for service, that would qualify, correct?
They could have gotten land as bounty land for military service, or they could have applied for land and been awarded a certificate that required that they took the oath of allegiance.
Okay.
Plus in Kentucky, there was the preemptive land warrants, where that they would have had to have been in the area very early, swear that they have grown a crop of corn, And
Right.
then that would actually qualify as service as well.
Yeah, that was by right of preemption or settlement. And Kentucky was one of, I think, 6 or 7 districts. Monongalia was in another district. So it's not just Kentucky. Kentucky was on a par with the other districts of Virginia. The nice thing about Kentucky is it's all in one nice bound volume.
And they've scanned them on the Secretary of State's website.
Ah, didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh,
nice color pictures of those.
Candy did a great
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
let me do another screen share real quick, because that's also something. If I go back to this again, if you sit down at we can add more sources. Just FYI, staff genealogists, I can always make this page go down further if there's some stuff you think patrons would, because you guys have added North Carolina land grants in there, but the Kentucky Land Office, anybody can search for this. The Secretary of State, Kentucky Land Office. By the way, the index is now way more prominent.
Yes, it is. That's beautiful.
Is absolutely wonderful compared to what it used to be. And so with these, just an example. Now, I don't know, I have not heard, I've not checked with Candy Atkinson. I need to ask her to see, because at one point they had run out of money doing the scanning, so they hadn't got through all of them. They had gotten maybe 2/3 done. And but with the surplus money that came through after COVID, it makes me wonder if maybe they got those finished, but I don't know. We need to find that out. But she's got Revolutionary War warrants in here. She's got all different kinds.
To the right, the second pink group right there, Cheri, is Certificate of Settlement and Preemptive Warrants that we were just talking about. Next group down.
But actually, I really want to show you real quick. Just because this is what I can show the images that I know I can get to really quick.
Sure.
It's browsable, because the thing about this site is that almost each one of them is a different way to find the people. Sometimes you type in and
search
search.
is a little wonky.
Exactly. And sometimes, like in this case, you can select a name and you can browse and literally just go through, which is so much easier because you catch surname spelling changes and such things like that. And so, but let's just pick any random person. Once you do find that, the associated documentation shows up, and they've scanned them high resolution. You can download those for free. They're all government images, so which means you can also republish them if you're doing a family history, and it's all in there, and they are absolutely, woo, that's a big one. That came on right at high resolution. So
Nice.
they're absolutely beautiful. And again, free resource. So that's actually something I would love to investigate more, to see what other states are doing this kind of thing, because that's a really great resource for people to dig into. But that's another one. Again, just Google Kentucky Secretary of State Land Office, and you should be able to get to that index page and explore, because like we said, each one of the little scanned or digitized sets can be a different search interface. You may need to type in a last name, or you can do browse. And so just FYI, spend some time. It's fun to explore those.
Another source that's often overlooked are the petitions, which recognize the Continental or the Revolutionary Government, and Virginia has those online at Virginia Memory.
It wouldn't be the Journals of the Continental Congress, would it? There's one. That's something that here's something that I pulled. Again, I will get the big camera and show you guys. But this is another, like this series, also online. So it has been digitized. Journals of the Continental Congress. There are some notations in here where people are supplying certain things or being tasked with rounding up some supplies and things like that. So, and I've even found some Native Americans in there that are coming forward and saying, hey, I'm supplying this many men or whatever. So that's a really great source for the different tribal groups that are assisting on the Patriot side, which is really good. Again, like I said, I will, these are a lot more, these are a lot bigger entries. They're a little bit more to wade through, but there is a really big index as well. So that's a really good one to take a look at. We are getting close to about 15-minute mark. Any other questions or tidbits or things that people want to share as far as That's their search and resources they use.
I do have
I
a
have-
question. Everybody, you mentioned several sources like Family Search and Ancestry and Fold3. Is there any other, I guess, sources or websites everybody, the staff looks at?
Mhm.
American Heritage.
Half the trust,
American
What
Heritage.
was that last one?
half the trust.
I will type
.org.
Yeah. Hathy Trust, you can get a lot of books for free.
History
Happy-
books, yeah.
Happy Trust is very similar to Internet Archive. It's the same kind of thing where they're digitizing as many older
Yeah.
copyright-free books that they can. So those are two very similar resources, but yet potentially different titles. So it's always good to take a look at both of them. So you said American Heritage, Bill?
Yeah. I think the actual website is American Ancestors.
Oh, American Ancestors. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's American Heritage is the people.
Oh,
Wait just a second. I'll tell you in just a second.
should be New England Historical and Genealogical Society.
Yeah, the various state archives are putting very valuable information online now. I use Maryland, I use Virginia, I use South Carolina quite a bit.
I've used Pennsylvania. They've got a big archive.
Is this what you're
Yeah.
talking about? Is this the one, Bill? American Ancestors?
American Ancestors.
Yeah, American Ancestors. I was just saying the wrong name.
Gotcha.
Yeah, American.
So-
He merged two different websites.
Yeah.
There you go. But yeah, American Ancestors is the site which is americanancestors.org. This is essentially a subscription-based site, but check with some of your libraries and things. They may have access in there. But it is done by the New England Historic and Genealogical Society, which is out of Boston. And yes, they are. Honestly, if I find out somebody's got some New England relatives in the area, I always like, oh, go to American Ancestors, because they will cover the rest of the East Coast, but their strength is going to be clearly a lot of New England records, because that's where they are situated, and it's the foundation of a lot of what they've done.
So I've got one, and it's totally not, while we were talking about all this, I started thinking about, the next generation and how are we going to get them involved? And, that's always kind of in the back of my head. And there's a website that I ran across a couple of years ago, and it's my granddaughter loves it. She loves being able to play this. She's, old enough to really start kind of getting into things. And it's mission-us.org. And what it is it's nothing more than a game. And it has the American Revolution. It's got the Civil War time frame. It's got 1907, 1866, 1922. And it's an action played game where you are one of these children that is living during this time frame. And you have to make decisions based on what you're being asked, what you're being talked to, how are you going to make these decisions? And I just love it because it makes us have to think about what kind of reaction and what type of decision would I have made? Would I have stood up to the British? Would I have, gone on or would I have given in and said, no, I'm going to, do this? So it's got the latest one that they added was one from 1960 about the civil rights movement. But it's just, even though that's not really genealogically based and we don't have records there or whatever, but it's still giving us an insight of, these people that were actually there during the time frame and what they were going through, So that's something just totally, again, not.
But I think that's important. I know it's important because it does, even if it's a simplified version, to kind of get you in the mindset of, I think we get so just tunnel vision with looking for specific documents. Like, for instance, when I mentioned the difference, or you guys had brought up the difference in the verbiage for civil service you know, that you're catching that because of your knowledge of the fact that people could be one or the other side, and locations could flip, or they could be firmly on one side versus the other. That's a local knowledge that you have to understand. So we've always talked about the importance of researching place and having that context, because if you don't, you can get some things really, really wrong. And, you know, and the thing is, it's like, even though this is SAR and there's a lot of DAR members here too, you know, we're very, very in tune with, and, you know, very focused on Patriotic Service, or, you know, on the Patriot side. You know, I've got a whole branch of family in Maryland that I've been looking for, that I'm like, you know, there's several men here who would have been in the right age range to have fought or do something. I can't find them in any of the claims. I can't find them in any kind of pensions. I can't find them in military service. So I'm going, ooh, I have to consider, you know. And then now there's a whole website on, you know, kind of reclaiming the names of loyalists that were in the state. So there's even, I think it's a scholar, I think it was out of one of the universities, they literally put up a website on trying to, you know, try to put together some sort of database so people can understand, you can actually get those names again and get the families back, as far as, because boy, once you were a loyalist after the war, it was kind of like, oh, we don't talk about that. Let's not talk about that. Let's not,
Right.
you know, and that is part of your history. You know, you have to be open to that. We naturally think that's where we're going to go. Oh yeah, of course my ancestor was a patriot. Maybe not.
Right.
And going hand in hand with your researching place, there are a lot of different websites that deal with it, but maps that allow you to go back in time through the various county changes, because as you're researching your people further and further back, the counties change. You know, one of the things that I used to always say at KHS to kind of hit home with that is Kentucky has 120 counties right now. When Kentucky was formed, there were 8. Well,
3.
yeah, there were 3. Yeah, and we used to actually be a county of Virginia, and so you can go back to just being a single county and now 120 or the formation, whichever. But you have to research the county boundaries and stuff too, because place names, the places would stay the same, but the counties would change around them. And the website that I like is mapofus.org. And it's got a lot of other different kinds of maps on there too. I mean, some places it's got the plats and land ownership and everything else. But the thing that I use it for most, honestly, is getting into the interactive county maps of each of the states to see where see when and how the boundaries changed of all the different places, and see, hey, would this guy have marched? I mean, I looked at a thing just the other day. The county that the applicant was saying that his person served in was way over on the western side of the state, but the county that the records that I was finding were way on the eastern side of the state. And then the place of service was a county that was 2 counties north of the eastern side, and it would have been a 400-mile hike for him to come over from the western side. And so using location can help you iron out the guys that you're dealing with trying to get the service, or girls. I mean, because being sexist, but there were women with service, and so the people with service, using location can help you iron out and keep from having, as our saying is, men of the same name, because that can be a problem, ironing that out. And so location is key when you're trying to differentiate between people within the same state.
Did you say mapofus.org?
Mapofus.org. Mapofus.org.
We'll put that in the chat.
And many times you share and many times what you can do is just Google the map of the state or the county in that state, and specify that what year you want. A lot of those will come up. I got lucky enough to do some research with a guy many years ago who's published a book on what the counties look like for every census year. So it's kind of, you do the research, you get the book. So another very good one is many people end up finding that between all of the two major, Genealogy Bank and newspapers.com, that a lot of newspapers still are not on those sites. So you can either Google them, which is always good, just newspapers, so-and-so county, whatever years, and a lot of them will pop up and they'll take you to an archive. There's a national archives, a couple of them for that, but every single state really has their own archive that outlines that. I mean, that's my huge frustration, is I've been trying to get our local historical society to take the newspaper that is falling apart and have it digitized.
Right.
One, it's easier for my research, but two, pretty soon these books will be destroyed.
Also check sometimes, and this is just known from a very geeky moment of my background. I used to skip class sometimes in college, my first years of college, so I was much younger back then, but I used to skip class sometimes to go read Revolutionary era newspapers. They were on microprint, not on microfilm. So check universities too, because there was an initiative, I think probably for the bicentennial, they were trying to capture those papers, but we always think of microfilm and it's like, no, a lot of those are in these big old boxes of microprint cards that some of the universities still have. I know it is an ongoing thing as far as digitizing those, but you're right, they're not all there, and there's just so much to do. I put in the link mapofus.org, and then also Newberry is also another one, the Digital Library of Newberry, to do the boundary changes.
Yeah.
As we were talking about location, and as Deborah mentioned with like motivation, our ancestors thinking about all of that, and as Deborah and I just came back from Roots Tech, actually speaking on avoiding ancestor identity theft, because the thing is, all of this has to fit. As Bill was talking about how, yeah, you may have information about a guy out here in West, but hey, guess what? Your ancestor was actually in the East. He's not going to go 400 miles to enlist or whatever. So all of these little pieces, and that's why location is a very important element as you are proving this person. It's not just about one piece of service or civil service, patriotic, military. It's not about one piece of paper. It's about proving that person's identity, and then in conjunction with what they may have done during this time period in that location, blah, blah, blah. Like there's a whole, which is important.
The whole packet. I just posted in the chat a directory.advantagepreservation.com. That's a website, Community History Archive, and that one has other newspapers that have not necessarily made it to newspapers, Library of Congress or Newspaper Archive. Yeah. Or any of the other ones. And that one is a little bit kind of wonky as well, where that you kind of have to know the area where, maybe a big town around that, or maybe even what part of the state you're looking for. But if you look into something where, and it's usually a public library or something in that area that has digitized those newspapers, that they're allowing them to be able to access the newspapers. So you have to kind of drill down a little bit, but I have found some pretty cool newspapers, specifically in Kentucky, that were not anywhere else. So
here's another two I'm going to put in the chat, because when we talk about archives, I know one of y'all mentioned like state archives. And so sometimes, yes, the one thing that I will tell you is that not every state necessarily has one central, very concerted effort for their archives. It can be scattered into more than one place in a state, depending on sometimes just regional focus. Don't forget, universities sometimes will swoop in there and grab some stuff. I remember being in Pittsburgh and going to the Heinz Center. They had tax records and some of the like jury lists and things like that from a couple of counties nearby that literally normally would have been in a state archive, but it wasn't. So, you got to think about these pockets, look at all these different places. Another one I'm putting in is, we talked about real quick newspapers. Chronicling America is the one I know we use a lot, because that was the Library of Congress, that is the Library of Congress's effort to try to digitize as many older newspapers as they can come across. However it is, it's always going to be a slow going thing. There's also the Digital Public Library of America, the DPLA. I put that link in there because sometimes they will put up some older newspapers as well. That's very similar to what Deborah was putting up, that directory, that preservation, the Advantage preservation site, because it's kind of smaller collections that are being added into. And so I wish all of this stuff was in one place. It's not. And so that's part of the research you've got to do. Again, we were talking about location, but location of records as well. There's just so much that's not online. More and more every day is online. Don't worry, it's getting there. It's just it's not all online, and there's just so much still you've got to burrow down and research from a local collection level.
I've got one more that that might be helpful when it comes to the maps. It's a Township Atlas of the United States by John Andright, and you can actually get information from that on Family Search. I actually have the book, but it's been great for me, because when you're doing research, you find that some of these have changed, and or you know that specific area, and unfortunately the township is like a tiny little piece that's in the big, bigger than the, whatever.
Yeah,
so good thing.
Wonderful. Well, any last quick questions? We're at 4 o'clock. Anybody got anything last to say? This has been really great. I think it's a lot of material.
Right. Thanks, Cheri. Hey, by the way, how do I end up keeping up on some of the programs you guys have? Yours just happened to come up on one of my feeds.
If you will go to library.sar.org, we have our own events tab now. So if you just bookmark that events, as I add new ones, you'll be able to see them, and they'll have the registration built in. You can just click on that and register for your class, whichever ones you like. In fact, we've got the next 2 months coming up. Like I said, the 18th century, researching Kentucky in the 18th century. That one's coming up next month. And then right after that, we're doing a case study caper. Actually, we're gonna read a National Genealogical Society quarterly article and kind of get together and talk about that. And then I've got some more stuff coming, but I haven't put them up yet. But yeah, look for library.sar.org and look at the events page. That's the best way.
Is library the whole word?
Library.sar.org.
And Cheri, are you going to have the chat available so that if we want to copy the links?
That gets saved. So if you specifically want the full chat, I can get you the full chat. What I will usually do is go through and harvest all the links that we put in so that they go in the final, like they'll appear on the screen when people are talking about it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they'll be able to get those. And usually too, what I will do is I'll take them and then recopy them into the description of the video in YouTube, so people can like literally click on or paste them. Or whatever. So
cool.
They'll all go in. All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you, John. I'll be emailing you soon.
Okay. I'll look for it this evening.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Have a good rest of your weekend.
You too.